Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Path to Play. It's Rory here.
And Valentina.
We're glad to have you back for part two of All About ID Camps. Today, we're going to kick it off with a memory of the day for Valentina. Can you give us one good memory about ID camps that for you personally?
I think the best part about ID camps, from what I remember, is that I got to go with a lot of my club teammates at the time. And I think that just made it a lot better. And it makes you feel even a little bit more confident because you know those players and you feel comfortable playing with them. And you get to stay in the dorms with them. So it just feels like this great big fun sleepover, and you get to see the facilities all together, and it all feels very lavish and out of reach almost. So I would say just the club camaraderie that comes along with you if you're lucky enough to go to those same ID camps. Usually it was the local ones.
Kind of like going on a field trip with your team, sort of?
Yeah, yeah, and it was obviously intense during the training times, but aside from that, it was probably a lot better to have them there than to not.
Yeah, definitely. I think having people really helps you calm the nerves and perform to your best.
Yeah, because there was some that I went to that I knew
Mhm.
no one you make friends, but it's different.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so last week we kind of talked about the details of ID camps. So if you haven't listened to that yet, I would listen to that first because we go into what they are, who goes, kind of all the details, everything you need to know as an intro to them.
Yeah, ID camps or ID clinics 101.
Yeah, exactly. And so then we're going to take the time today to go into our personal experiences with ID camps, what we think about them, and what advice we have for you guys with them.
Yeah, kind of our perspective based on our own experiences and from people around us that were able to go to ID camps as well. And that's why we wanted to set up the first part of this mini series with just an overview.
Can you kick us off with about how many ID camps you went to and what schools they were? Doesn't need to be exact, but just kind of overall.
I think I went to definitely all the Arizona State schools. So, Arizona State University, University of Arizona, and Northern Arizona University. So, those are 3. I went to NAU at least twice, and then went to University of Denver, went to Seattle U. I think that was it, honestly. I think
Hmm.
those were maybe all of them. I maybe did one other one, but I can't remember. It might have been one of the ones where there's multiple coaches, but I don't remember. And I did go to University of Denver also a couple of times.
It's a pretty good mix, though. When did you start going to them?
I was a s I think I was a freshman. Yeah, I was a
Wow.
freshman in high school, and that was because ASU, Arizona State, had a big camp that they
Hmm.
brought in even high school teams. Like, I remember one of the times I went was with my high school team, and they kinda opened it up and promoted to local players, and my mom also would just send me over this summer.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of those where it'll be kind of like a fusion between an ID camp and like summer camp sort of thing where they're doing a bit of both, just kind of getting people out there and building some community interaction, but then also scouting some players.
Yeah, and I think they were very closely connected with not only my high school team and just the local high schools that were 6A, which was the top division, but also the club teams around that
Hmm.
were also the top tier teams or clubs, sorry, at the time. So I think that they were wanting to also maintain some of those relationships and the talent pipeline of players. So it definitely makes sense.
Hmm. And so, of all these camps, which ones do you think were your favorites to go to?
Definitely the NAU camp, and I think probably because that felt further away from home and it felt like it was a nice area. Like, it felt for me I wanted to go there at one point, and I was getting heavily recruited to go there, and I was probably likely going to commit there had I not switched clubs. And so I remember I felt very comfortable and I had
Mhm.
gone with a lot of my club teammates who I think at the time maybe one or two were committed to go there already because they were older. And some schools like to bring in their already committed players, verbally committed players to come in and do the ID camps, just either I think to raise the level a little bit and to also see how they interact with the team that's there at the school, and then also see how they interact with other players and I guess probably evaluate their character in a way. So I'd say that was probably my favorite because I think the way that they structured it was also really great. I think they offered training sessions throughout the day and they gave you the opportunity to also spend time in the dorms with some of the girls, and we got a lot of facilities tours, and it felt like you were really living the college
Mhm.
experience because you were away from home, away from your parents, and you were navigating the campus, showing up to trainings. You would just get the schedule handed to you, and you would have to show up, and then the nighttime, there were scrimmages, and then actually the last day, if you made the all-star team, you got to play against the actual college team at the time, so that was really cool to do, and even when it felt like we were gonna get absolutely trucked by these big players, because I was around 15 at the time, it was a really cool experience. So I think I have a lot of really good memories from that camp specifically.
That is cool. How'd you guys do against the college team?
I don't remember, but we definitely didn't win. I remember a couple of goals for sure, but we put up a good fight, I think. We had a decent team together, and like I said, a couple of those girls were also already committed, so they definitely knew some of those players as
Mhm.
well, but we definitely didn't win.
That is cool. I never went to any like that. But from your experience, what would you say were the most beneficial things from going to these camps?
I think probably getting that exposure to the college playing style, that was probably huge for me. I think also learning how to navigate conversations with coaches because one of the other ID camps I went to at the University of Denver, that was one of the ones where they would bring in many coaches as well.
Mhm.
So I think it was worthwhile, even if I maybe wasn't interested in some of the other schools. It was worthwhile to have to connect with them and see how they ran their drills, and you would have to be a part of the drills and the practices. And I think also another thing that is very valuable is you're getting experience playing with players who are very different levels and you've never played with before, and you just have to adapt and do focus on your game and focus on being a team player. And it's hard because you know you're there to get watched. Like,
Mhm.
you're being watched. That's the whole reason you're going. So it's a hard thing to do, but I think that's one of the things that makes you a better player because you have to make an active effort to let go of that thought and just focus on playing how you know how to play. And I think ultimately, hopefully, having a good time because that'll help you relax and pass and get to know how the other girls play, things like that. So I think those three things were probably the most valuable for me. And I guess I'll add one other one, seeing the campus as well,
Yeah.
because you really get a good feel for, do I like this area or not? Like, when I went to the U of A camp, the campus is really cool, but I didn't like Tucson as a place to live permanently probably, and I probably realized that very early on when I went to one of the camps.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think because we've talked about it earlier, but location is huge. Like
Mhm.
if you get hurt or anything like that and you're just stuck there and you can't play soccer, you want to be in a cool place. So being able to see the facilities and everything
Yeah.
in the town or city, wherever it is super important. And talking to coaches, I would say, is a big one too, because you really don't ever get any chance to talk to college coaches. And so getting as many, I would say, I guess, reps of talking to them as
Yeah.
possible is huge.
Yeah, because it is hard to it feels like now that I look back and I reflect, it very much does feel like how you navigate job
Yeah.
conversations now. And you're just so immature back then and nervous and awkward. So I think that really helps to, like you said, kind of build your confidence in knowing things to say and actually sound genuine because these coaches probably get so many players coming up
Oh,
to
yeah.
them to talk to them.
What would you say would make a camp a successful one for you?
For me personally, or
Yeah,
for, okay.
or for a player, I guess, but from your experience.
I guess it depends on your goals, right? Because you
Mhm.
can go to an ID camp just for extra practice. You can go to an ID camp with hopes of getting recruited. You can go to an ID camp with the intention to just get extra exposure from many different schools so that you can figure out maybe which one is most similar to the style you're looking for, or maybe you go just because you want to check out the campus. So I feel like it's very personal in what defines a successful camp for someone. I think for me, I definitely was very intentional with the camps that I went to, maybe minus Arizona State. Like, I think at one point I had big dreams of going to Arizona State, as many Arizona soccer players probably do. But I think I realized it was a little bit out of my reach at the time, and so that was probably the one exception where I would go just because, A, my mom would want me to go, get a little bit extra practice, and the experience overall was valuable, and B, I would have to go with my team for high school. But aside from that exception, I think all the other ones I was very intentional about going and either trying to scope it out and see if it was a good target school for me, or I was already communicating with the coach
Mhm.
and I wanted to continue the conversation. And so that was one way to do it, going and getting extra looks and extra playing time and drills where they can watch you in a different space outside of things like showcases and tournaments and things like that.
Yeah, I think, uh, for me, I would kinda have it the same as you, where a successful one would be you get both to show off your ability and get more attention from the coaches than you usually would at like a
Mhm.
showcase. But then you also get to do your kind of research on the school and the players there and the coaches and just kind of see if that would be a fit for you as well as kind of marketing yourself towards
Yeah,
them.
that's a great way to put it, and I guess I didn't really answer your question in what based on my personal goals, what defined my success. I think at the time I was very obviously young and just wanted to figure out my career path for soccer at that point, so it was really difficult to say after a camp and think, "Oh, this one went really well, and I'm so happy and satisfied." Because I was maybe expecting an offer right then and there. But the reality is that is very
Mhm.
unlikely. That whole situation is unlikely to play out right then and there. I think it's one of those things that takes time, unless of course you are one of those very talented standout players. But I think that looking back on it now, a successful camp and putting myself in my own shoes back then, probably felt like a consistent performance over the
Mhm.
course of whatever many days I was there, and I feel like as an athlete, you can really feel when you either performed well or performed a little bit under your usual average self.
Mhm.
So if I left feeling like I was confident in my game and my style, and I had decent conversations with the coaches, was and we kind of agreed that I would reach back out or something like that, or that we would connect in the next couple of weeks, that felt like a successful camp for me.
Yeah, I would say that's a really good point. Starting like the communication line between you and a coach, it would be a major success, especially if you haven't talked to them before that.
Yeah, and it was very much very hard effort from me of,
Mhm.
pushing the, "All right, well, I'll email you next week,"
Yeah.
and I'll things like that. So, I think it requires a lot of effort too.
Did you ever go to any that you felt like was kind of a waste of time? And if so, why?
Yes, and I think probably the bigger schools, like I
Uh-huh.
said, like the Pac-12 schools back then at the time, like U of A or ASU. Again, not a total waste of time, but for my specific goals of I'm trying to get recruited, probably, because I think we touched on this in the last episode, but when the camps are huge, you're not really getting the same looks
Right.
as when there's a more reasonable amount of players within the pool of people that are there. So again, not a total waste of time because I've spoken already to the other many intangible benefits that you might leave with. But I definitely do think that for my goals of trying to get recruited and keeping the conversation going, that didn't necessarily fulfill those goals at the time. So I think ultimately I went to those probably early on in my high school years, and the reason I didn't end up going back once I was in the very heavy recruiting portion of my high school career was because I knew that that was probably not worth my time or my parents' money.
Yeah. I went to one at the University of Washington when I was a sophomore in high school, I believe, and that one was kind of on the edge of, like, what you're talking about because that's also a really big school, and so I think it was close to being a little too big to where we're just, like, spread out across, like,
Mhm.
so many different fields, like, there's no
Right.
way they can watch you, but
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
you
Like
do there are other benefits, and they obviously
mhm.
still are watching, it's just a little
Yeah.
harder, I
No,
would
no,
say.
yeah, and you're so right about that. Like, I just got this immediate flashback to the U of A camp. We were quite literally all extended out on the practice fields, and they had one scrimmage on the main game field, and all the coaches were there. I don't even know who was watching the practice fields, if I'm being honest, but how how aud the audacity, right, to
Yeah.
not even be at the other fields, which again, not name calling or saying that and
Right.
it's anyone's fault, I get it, but it's just funny to think about now, and like you said, I don't think it was a total waste of time because I think doing those early on was really a good way to start to be more intentional with which
Mhm.
ones you did go to and figure out which ones were actually worth your time and your money as you progressed in your career.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a good kind of view of the landscape early on, and that's definitely a good place to start for
Mhm.
sure.
Agree. Okay, so I've talked a lot about my experiences as a player in ID camp, and I know evidently that's probably because I did a few more than you did. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I only did one. That one
The
at
University of
University of Washington,
Washington?
yeah.
Okay. Did you like that one overall? Did you
I
stay
did.
there?
No, it was not an overnight. I think it was 2 days, but I'm from Seattle and lived there, so I just
Yeah.
drove there and back, but I don't think they were doing the dorms or anything like that anyways. But it
Okay.
was a pretty good camp, I would say.
I always thought it was so cool when I would go to camps and someone would tell me that they were from the area and they were just driving in. I just thought it was cool because I was probably traveling from far away. So, anyways, since I've given a lot of the player perspective, I know you helped out with coaching some of these ID camps very closely with your coaching staff. How can you describe your role in how you were involved with ID camps, if not as a player?
Yeah, so at Seattle U, they would give the players the chance to help work the ID camps, which was super fun and definitely kind of a full circle moment because you were some of those camps when you were younger. So it was a completely different perspective, but definitely one that I really appreciated in the moment.
Mhm. And so would you run the drills, the scrimmages? Would your coaches be around? Like, what was the environment like with for you as a coach?
Yeah, so all four coaches would be there the whole time and they would run the drills for the most part, but the players would typically be broken out into smaller groups to run the drills, obviously, because too many kids for one drill. So then the players would help run the individual smaller drills, but the four coaches would always kind of be hovering. And then later on, after we did the more technical drills and we moved on to the scrimmages, we would help we would be the quote unquote coaches. So we would have a team of 11 or 9, depending on the camp, and we would coach the team, pick the 11, and make subs. And then also we led the tours around the campus.
I actually remember walking by one of those camps once when you guys were coaching the scrimmages, and it looked like a lot of fun. And I imagine it's a lot more fun for the players who come to have one of the actual men's soccer team players be the coach of the
Yeah, I
team.
think it definitely helped because, I mean, as a player on the team, you're kind of intimidated by your coach. Like,
Mhm.
for those people who aren't even on the team and they're way younger, obviously they're going to be
Mhm.
even more. So I think having someone closer to their age and understanding of their situation definitely helps a lot. And it's the players are there just having fun, so you're able to just kind of help them be serious and perform to their best, but also like chill out. And
Yeah, and just have a good time.
yeah.
So, you being part of the coaching staff and organizing and coordinating these ID camps, what do you think some of the coaches would look for, or what were even you told to look for when you were writing notes on players and things like that?
Yeah, I think one thing that I didn't think about before coaching some of these ID camps was a lot of the time the coaches were looking for players who stood out, but in a way of where they were calm and they were composed and able to operate at their best within the chaos of all the people there. Because a lot of the time you would see players who were super in their head thinking like, I need to do this to look good, and they're just not really playing soccer at that point. They're just kind of like too locked in on one thing. But there would always be some players who just kinda seemed way more in control and way more connected to all the players around them, and you could think like, "Wow, this guy has a really good understanding of the game and ability to work with others."
Right, because that's knowing that they don't actually play with any of those players. They've never even met them, and so the ability to adapt and be a team player in both on and off the field is really tough, and I think says a lot to someone as a player and a person on and off the field.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think another thing, a little more obvious, but work rate for sure. I think a lot of the time it's something that people don't really think about when they're trying to show off to the coaches and kinda sell themselves, but that's really an appreciated thing for the coaches is someone who's working hard and focused and, like, trying to compete and win. That's a huge part of, like, a successful player and someone that coaches will see and think like, "Oh, they have potential." And then also, obviously, the technical skills. At the start of the day when we would do technical drills, you can really see people who have put in the extra work and are much cleaner around
Mhm.
passing drills and dribbling drills, and so that also helps as well.
Would you say though that some of the things that you look for, whether they're technical qualities on the ball or character qualities, I would imagine that some of those things that you're told to look out for are also dependent on the current roster on the team and perhaps what the coaching staff needs at the time, right? Like maybe one season they need a tall defender who can head any ball that comes their way. But maybe another season they just need some midfielder who is consistent, who can adapt and is nimble on the field. And I just feel like that'd be a curiosity point for me. Like, how often does that happen where one year they might need that first kind of player and then the next year they might need the latter?
That definitely does factor into the thinking because obviously you have limited roster space and limited scholarships, so you do have to plan accordingly to what you have. But I do also think there are some kind of non-negotiable things that'll
Yeah.
get you viewed no matter what, no matter if they have someone kind of like that, because
Mhm.
the coaches are never going to turn down a player who's just kind of like they know will be
A
a very
standout,
good standout.
well-rounded
Yeah, exactly. But
player.
I will say all coaches definitely have their preferences, so there's definitely certain things that coaches will see and kind of latch on to.
Mhm. Well, everything is subjective in this world,
Yes, it is.
so we can't control that. And so, what are some of the things that you would suggest players do and shouldn't do? Like do's and don'ts for players in the space of ID camps?
Yeah, I would say a big do would be really try and just focus on being there, being present, and trying to perform to your best in all the drills and everything because that attention to detail and focusing on yourself will go a long way. That'll kind of set your base in their minds. If you're really not doing well in the technical thing, that's going to kind of affect their thinking on you. So I think definitely that being sharp mentally, ready to go from the start. 2, being a good team player and being confident. Like I was talking about earlier, the people who have the confidence and the kind of mental fortitude to kind of step forward. It doesn't even have to be like yelling and stuff like that, but you'll see like people who are willing to get on the ball, willing to bring their teammates into the game and just kind of slow it down, make a huge difference, especially in that chaotic environment. So I would say that's probably the biggest one. And then be positive, be happy, and just try hard because that's really what they want as well. They want players who are gonna be good for the program beyond just technical ability.
Yeah, agree. And I think if things aren't going your way, I think if you continue to perform and control the factors that you always have control over, I think that that goes a long way. And it's really hard in those situations where you know there's a lot of pressure on you because it's hard to separate yourself from that mental state when you're kind of stuck in that situation for a period of a couple days. But
Yeah,
it comes with time, I think. And like you said, even just the effort of becoming a little bit more of a team player and creating that team environment with players that you don't know might even help you play a little bit more loosely
yeah,
than if you didn't
definitely.
do that. So that's those are two great pieces of advice.
And then for don'ts, I would say definitely don't get discouraged. If you start out poorly or maybe it's a 2-day, 3-day camp and your first day you don't think you play very well, do not get discouraged. You still have more time, so just try your hardest and try and get back on track and kind of don't let early mess ups or early jitters or nerves kind of hinder your performance at all. I would say that's probably the biggest don't. And don't close yourself off to the experience because you're there for a multitude of reasons. And I think if you kind of like get in your own head and think, oh, this isn't worth it, you're just not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah, and it's easy to let those early negative thoughts bleed into the rest of the experience. So I think the sooner that you can open yourself up to the whole experience and allow yourself to mess up and learn, the better it will feel in the end. And the more confident you'll come out of it, even if it wasn't your desired outcomes.
Okay, so we've covered a lot so far. Recapping with a kind of general question, are camps necessary?
I feel that labeling them as ultimately necessary is a hard label that might not apply to everyone. Once again, I think it depends on your goals and what you want to get out of the experience. And
Agreed.
so I
Agreed.
think that going back to many of our early episodes, being able to delineate your goals early on and figuring out where you might need to invest time and energy in will help you figure out whether camps are worth your time or not. So I think it's worth doing pros and cons evaluations.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it really depends on where you are in your journey. I think a lot of it comes down to where you're playing and your club and how much exposure you're getting, because they are a great way to get exposure. I only went to one and it didn't really affect my college path, but my brother went to a few and that's how he got scouted for his school. So it just kind of depends on your journey. Okay, and so then what would you say players should do in preparation for a camp?
Honestly, I think similar to my last answer, I think just come with an open mind. I think there's a lot of factors that you truly aren't going to be able to control while you're at the camp. I think the best thing you can do is just allow yourself to, like you said, be fully present and learn from others, from the experiences, from even what the coaches have to say, even if you feel like you disagree. I just feel like it's such a good experience, and I think that there's many players out there who wish they could be in those scenarios, and it's easy to dig a hole for yourself if things aren't going well, or again think that the world's crashing down because the coach didn't necessarily notice you in the way that you would have wanted to, or maybe you get placed on a team that you wouldn't have wanted to be placed on, or you feel like you're struggling with the style of play with the group that you're in for the rest of the week. And yes, that can feel like things aren't going your way. But I think if you are coming to an ID camp where you've already invested the money, you're coming, whether it's local or far and wide, you're going to be spending your time doing this for your sport. You might as well get something out of it. So I'm a big believer of you get out what you put in. And I think that that very much applies to a scenario like an ID camp where there's a lot of other moving pieces while you're there.
100% agree. That's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. Just be prepared and to have fun and just ready to
Yeah.
go and get the
If
most out of it.
If anything, use it as a way to improve your touch and your
Yeah,
technical acumen on the ball and how to interact with other players that you might not usually interact with, or coaches and things like just so many things that you can get out of it.
yeah, no, I totally agree. That is all we have for today, guys. ID camps are a very complex beast. So if there are any questions or any other topics related to them that you want us to dive into, again, please just let us know, send us a message, and we can totally do that.
Yes, we hope you enjoyed the mini series. Again, feel free to listen to part 1 if you haven't already.
See you guys next week.
See you next week.